Welcome everybody to Restoration on this online Shabbat. I'm Rabbi Matt. So glad you could join us. Welcome to those who are watching on our Restoration app and those who are watching on YouTube. If you haven't downloaded our Restoration app, we want to encourage you to do that. Everything about our community is inside that app. Members and regular attenders know they give through the Restoration app. And there's also notifications. If you turn on notifications of your app, you'll get some notifications. We promise we're not going to spam you, but you'll get notifications and reminders from Restoration in this season. We also have a Helping Others Fund, and as we have through this whole time of meeting together, which we're almost to an entire year of not meeting together, which is crazy. In fact, it was supposed to snow a couple weeks ago in Seattle, and Rabbi Ibars and I were meeting together, and he said, it's supposed to snow this weekend. I thought, oh no, we're going to have to cancel our service. Because, well, that's the way it used to feel. Now it's like, well, I think we'll be okay. So we want to encourage you to turn on those notifications and run with us in the Restoration app and to give to the Helping Others Fund, because we've really been able to help and continue to help lots of people here in our community that need help in this season. We've been talking about the idea of being completely other and a series on idolatry, which comes from the first 4 of the 10 Commandments. And we're going to end that series today with a message called Rest More, Not Do More. And it's about the Sabbath and what the Sabbath is really for. And I've noticed in this season of pandemic and us not meeting together, I've realized in conversation with people and even with my own family, there's a for those of us who keep the Sabbath, it's more difficult to keep the Sabbath when you don't have a synagogue service to go to. So it's not for me, because I'm actually here every Saturday still recording messages, and I'm still meeting with people, and, well, rabbis always work on the Sabbath. But the idea of the Sabbath is because we're not meeting together. Many people have said to me, well, we don't want to lose the whole day, or we use the day for this and that. And there's no judgment in it. It's just this idea that just as we've been talking about being completely other, because the scriptures say, be completely other because I am completely other. The word holy means completely other, as we've been saying through this series. That the Sabbath is designed to help us make the day completely other from the other 6. And it's designed to help us have a rest stop, a day where we stop and pause so that the other 6 are more productive. I've also said the last few weeks that following this series, when we finish Completely Other, we're going to start a series of messages on the other 6, which are the other 6 commandments. But in the middle of working on all of these series, I found out that my first book, my book, Jesus Never Said Anything New, is currently available for pre-order on Kindle on Amazon, and will be available on February 19th to order in paperback. We thought it would be fun after finishing this series, Completely Other. We're going to do a series based on the book called Jesus Never Said Anything New, and it's really going to be a lot of fun. If you're part of Restoration, you've heard me preach these things over the last 3 years as I worked out the book. Now that the book's done, we're going to go back through them together. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And we will encourage you over the next few weeks to encourage your friends to buy the book. Jesus Never Said Anything New on Amazon. So today we finish the series Completely Other, Rest More, Not Do More. Now, I grew up on the East Coast, in the Northeast, in New York, and when we would go on trips, you take I-95, and on I-95, there are rest stops, and in every rest stop in New Jersey, on the Jersey Turnpike, every rest stop, there is the only place that Roy Rogers Chicken is still left, is in New Jersey on rest stops. And so for us, when you take long drives, and you know when they created interstates in the United States, that are highways of travel in between states, they developed rest stops. Now, in some places, you get, like Washington and Oregon, you get just a bathroom and like vending machines. So on the East Coast, other parts of the country, I know as well, but my context is the East Coast. On the East Coast, man, you get these giant, beautiful buildings that have bathrooms and restaurants and a place to sit. This was all before COVID. A place to sit and to stop and to pause and to refuel, to put gas in your car so you can keep going. And I realized that the design of the Sabbath day, there are 7 days in the week and 6 are designed for work, and the 7th is designed not to work and to rest. That the Sabbath day itself is like a rest stop on the Jersey Turnpike. It's a place for us to refuel. It's a place for us to eat. It's a place for us to stop. And it's a place for us to rest. And you get gross Roy Rogers chicken to help you do that. But in some of the rest stops, they have Cinnabons. And in some of the rest stops, they have all kinds of wonderful things. And this is the nature of the Sabbath day. It follows the commandments that we've been reading in this series. The first 3 are about idolatry, and the 4th is the Sabbath day. And I've said throughout the series, the first 4 commandments of the 10 commandments are about our relationship with God, people and God. The other 6, which we'll come back to after the series on Jesus Never Said Anything New, are relationships of people to other people. And so it made sense to finish this series, Completely Other, talking about the importance of Shabbat, the Sabbath day. So in verse 8, Exodus chapter 20 and verse 8, it says, remember the day of Shabbat and keep it holy. Remember, that means completely other. Remember Shabbat and keep it completely other. You are to work 6 days and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work. Not you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, your female servant, your cattle, nor your outsider that is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that was in them, and rested on the 7th day. So Adonai blessed the Sabbath day and made it completely other. And so this is the principle of rest that goes back to God creating the heavens and the earth in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. And when he completes his creation, the first thing he does is rest. Later in the Torah, comes a commandment to imitate God in rest by observing the Shabbat, literally a day of rest for us. And the commandment for Shabbat occurs again in the Torah. It's connected with the idea of the Jewish people being slaves in Egypt, Deuteronomy. When God set us free, he gave us an opportunity to rest or observe Shabbat. And we all need rest. For goodness sake, in a time of pandemic and online school and all the different things that we're facing, we probably need more rest now than we did before. Because before it was all crazy and we needed rest, but now it's crazy in all these different ways and we need rest. We need a time to pause. We need a time to reset from the last week and prepare for the week ahead. And you may think you don't need rest, but observing Shabbat is a command from God to pause as people who imitate God and are free rest. The Sabbath is really a gift. It's not a burden. And there's only one Sabbath day. It's the 7th day. It's Saturday. And our goal at Restoration, particularly for Gentile Christians who listen to our messages, even are a part of our community, we're not trying to get you to become Jews, because you can't become a Jew. But if you can understand the principle of wisdom that is found in the Torah when it comes to something like the day of rest can't be replaced with another day. There's only one day, rest. And God designed it for you to rest. And he gave us Shabbat so we could cease from work, which is what the word Shabbat actually means. In fact, in Jewish history, the idea of Shabbat is portrayed in liturgy and in songs and in stories as a sanctuary from travails and even a foretaste of the perfected world that will someday be attained. Meaning, in the end of all things, all we'll have is rest. When Yeshua comes back for his own and we're together with him, we will ultimately have rest and there will be no more stress. And the word Shabbat itself, the root word, every Hebrew word has 3 root letters. And the root for Shabbat is Shin Beit Tav. And it means to cease. And Shabbat is a part of God's covenant with the Jewish people. And there's an invitation to Gentiles to understand and live out his gift of rest. We're not trying to get everyone a restoration. We're not trying to get everyone who follows Jesus to keep the Sabbath. We're trying to encourage people to understand the principle of rest by understanding Shabbat. If you're a part of Restoration, and covenant members and regular attenders or watching on the Restoration app or on YouTube, the encouragement this morning is find rest. And it dawned on me as I was working out this series on idolatry that the Sabbath day is the ultimate deterrent of idolatry. It's framed right in the beginning of the commandment to keep the Sabbath and the end when it says the Lord made the day completely other, and so you need to have the day be completely other. So how do you make it completely other? It was easy prior to COVID, and it will be easy again soon when we actually have a service on Saturday that people can attend. Because then you take some time out of your day and you go to a service and you participate. But in the season where we haven't met together, how do you separate? And it's really about sevens, which goes all the way through the Torah. There's the 7th day, and even the 7th month on the Jewish calendar is completely other than the other months, because the 7th month has 3 holidays in it. And there's the principle of the Jubilee of the 50 years, which is described in the Torah as 7 times 7 equals 49 plus 1 is Jubilee. It's 49 days plus 1. So this number 7 just keeps coming back in from the principle of Shabbat. And here's what Shabbat is for. I want to give you 5 things that Shabbat is for. It's a reminder of creation. It's an imitation of the Creator. It's liberation from slavery. It's the promise of preservation. And it's a provision of rest. So the first is, Shabbat is a reminder of creation. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 says, "So the heavens and the earth were completed along with their entire array, and God completed on the 7th day his work that he had made, and he ceased on the 7th day from all his work that he had made. Then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, set it apart. For on it he ceased from all his work that God created for the purpose of preparing." See, when we celebrate Shabbat every 7 days, we're reminding ourselves of the creation. We're reminding ourselves of the work God did in 6 and then the rest that he took on the 7th. Did God have to rest? No. God doesn't need rest. But he illustrated for us in his own creating, that in the creating that we do as his sons and daughters, that we have to rest. Now, people often think, man, if I could just get more done, if I just had more hours in the day, if I could just work 7 days a week, then I could get more done. But the principle from the scripture is it's a reminder of creation, and if God himself rested, so should you and I. Sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. It's a day to not do a regular work. Now, there's all kinds of rules that the rabbis added, and there's all kinds of things that people think they understand about the Sabbath and what shouldn't be done on the Sabbath day. But the truth is, the basic commandment is do not do your regular work. And regular work is different for each person. And in practical ways of our lives, we could cease from our regular work. If you're a student, don't study on Saturday. If you're in finance, don't do finance on Saturday. If you're a parent, don't parent on Saturday. Just kidding. You have to do that every day. But you should give yourself some time away from your children. And if you don't have anybody to help you give time away from it, I mean, this is the reason why we have date night in our house. We try. Doesn't happen as often as it should, but we take dates on Fridays because it gives us a break. It's rest. And in all these different, it doesn't matter who you are and what you do, there are opportunities to rest. And it reminds us of creation. The second is, it's an imitation of the Creator. Exodus 20, 8 through 11, we just read, remember and keep the day completely other. It's a day for not your ordinary work. And the last verse 11 is, for in 6 days Adonai made heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. So Adonai blessed the Shabbat, the day of Shabbat, and made it completely other. It's this idea that we, when we rest, are imitating God in our regular weekly lives. We work 6, we take a break on the 7th, for it is 6 days that the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and he rested the 7th. So do not do regular work. It's funny, there's a principle in the scriptures and where in the interpretation of the Torah from the rabbis, which I find super helpful. We never really, when somebody observes the Torah, as I do, when you observe the Torah, you don't often find yourself asking a question in a regular situation in your daily life. Should I keep commandments or not? What you find is, in different situations, which commandment is more important to keep this situation than in other situations. The easiest way to explain that is the idea of the Sabbath and doctors. In every form of Judaism, Reform, Conservative, and even the most ultra-Orthodox, medical professionals work on the Sabbath. And the reason why they work on the Sabbath and are still observant of Torah is because saving a life is more important than keeping the Sabbath. And if you have an opportunity to save a life on the Sabbath day, then you take the opportunity to save the life. It comes from verses in the Torah that tell us if your friend is, it's before Shabbat and they get stuck in a ditch, their donkey gets stuck in a ditch and like the sun's going down, but you got to get home for Shabbat. You don't just drive past. You stop and you help them. Even if it gets into the Sabbath, you help them get out of the ditch so that they can observe the Sabbath as well. So there are opportunities where we're supposed to look at the commandments more like the flow of water, as Bruce Lee once said. The water, it's alive. It's engaging in our lives. It's a part of our everyday thought process. It's not, should I keep commandments or not? It's, what is the best reflection of the one who created me and created all things? It is the imitation of Creator. We started with this in the first message. We want to be imitators of God. That's our design. So part of the imitation of God is not doing your regular work. And rest is different for each person. There's ways to rest. There's people who work in their minds all day and are on a computer that probably need to do something with their hands on the Sabbath day. There's people who do stuff with their hands, like carpenters and builders and construction workers that need to rest their hands and do something with their mind on the Sabbath. Rest is different. As regular work is different for each person, so rest is different as well. The third part of what Shabbat is liberation from slavery. Deuteronomy 5, verse 12 says, observe the day of Shabbat and keep it holy, completely other, as Adonai your God commanded you. 6 days you're to labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you're not to do any regular work, not your son or your daughter or your slave or your maid or your ox or your donkey or your livestock or the outsider within your gates, so that your slave and your maid may rest as you do. And this is where Deuteronomy tells it a little different than Exodus. Because in Exodus, it says, like creation, God rested. But in Deuteronomy, Verse 15, it says, "You must remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Adonai your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, Adonai your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath." It's in Deuteronomy 5, verse 15. While Moses reiterates the Ten Commandments, he notes the second thing that we must remember on Shabbat. Remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt. God set you free, so celebrate, observe the Sabbath day. Because like we talk about in Passover, we were slaves, but now we're free. Slaves can't rest. Slaves don't say, "I'm going to stop working today." But people who are free rest. And, oh man, this is where it gets real. So many of you are slaves to your jobs. You're slaves to the idea of making money. You're slaves to, "I just need to provide for my family more, and the more I work, the more I can provide." But liberation is, God comes in and says, actually, you rest more rather than do more. I'll do more for you in your rest. It's like if we take the Sabbath day and experience the freedom that God built us for, and we look at it as this rest stop where we can refuel and pause and stop and eat and rest so that we can continue the drive into next week. It's what free people do. We pause and we say, I'm not going to work today. I read a great book actually at the beginning, right before the pandemic happened. I read a great book by John Mark Comer, who's a pastor in Portland, called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And within this book, he gives all of these practical ideas of how we can rest and be free. And some of them are so ridiculous, they made me laugh. And it's hard to even do them now in the pandemic. And I was like, I'm going to put these things into practice. And then the whole world changed. But he says things simply like, when you go to Costco, choose the longest line. Stand in the longest line and don't look at your phone. Just stand there and wait. In the gas line for Costco, pick the longest line. They're all Costco in my mind. I don't know why. You pick the longest line and just sit there and wait. Like there's a practice, not just with the Sabbath day itself, but moments of rest. There's a few apps like the YouVersion and this new app that I found called Faithful, and it gives you, little sermons from pastors and based on the time you want to be in there, from 5 to 10 minutes, and they send you verses. You can set up notifications to send you verses, and if you can weave those things into your day, into your week, and you find yourself these little moments of pause that happen during the week, and then you get to Saturday and you can pause for the day. Now, some understand it to mean that when you keep the Sabbath, that you can't watch TV and you can't spend money and you can't read books that aren't about God, and you can't, people have all these different ways that they try to figure out the day. And I don't think any of those things are bad, but it's about making the day intentional because we're not slaves. We're free, and we've been liberated from our slavery so that we can rest. The next is the Shabbat is a promise of preservation. Leviticus 25, verse 1 to 8 says, "Then the Lord said to Moses on Mount Sinai, speak to the sons of Israel and tell them, when you come into the land which I give you, the land is to keep a Shabbat." Okay, so there's not just a Shabbat for people, but there's a Sabbath rest for land. Leviticus 25, verse 3 continues, "For 6 years you sow your field, and for 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year, there's to be a Shabbat rest for the land. So don't sow your field or prune your vineyard. You're not to reap what grows by itself during your harvest, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine. It is to be a year of Sabbath rest for the land. And whatever the Sabbath of the land produces will be food for yourself, for your servant, for your maidservant, for your hired worker, for your outside dwelling among you. livestock, for your animals and all its increase. There'll be enough food. You're to count out off 7 shabbats of years, 7 times 7, so that there's even a Shabbat rest, 49 years. Leviticus 25 continues in verse 18. It says, therefore, you're to keep my statutes and observe my ordinances and carry them out so that you may live securely in the land. Then the land will yield its fruit and you may eat of your fill and live there in safety. Now, if you ask, what are we to eat during the 7th year when we're not to sow or gather our increase? I will command my blessing to you in the 6th year so that it will yield a harvest sufficient for 3 years. And when you sow during the 8th year, you will still be eating the old stored harvest until the harvest of the 9th year comes in. It's a promise of preservation. And it's interesting because I'm not sure that Israel ever actually did this. It sure doesn't seem like it in the Hebrew scripture. In fact, we go to the Babylonian captivity for 70 years because we missed 70 Sabbath years. And so God sends us into captivity before we can go back to the land. And it's the food that is produced in this season that would last for actually the whole 3 years. Because remember, you plant a harvest for like next season, right? You reap the harvest later. And so if you were to stop your fields from a whole year of growing, that means the next year you don't have any food. And Leviticus promises bountiful harvest to those who observe this process and describe it as an observance, as a test of faith. There is little notice of the observance of this actually in the text. And it's for us, we find ways to apply this idea that the Sabbath is a promise of preservation. I know that if I only work 6, that I will make more money and do more with 6 than I could ever do with 7. Because if I do 7, I will burn myself out and I am a slave to my job and I will not have rest. But if we take the rest that God gives us, the gift that he's given us of rest, then the 6, we can produce more than if we tried to work all 7. But there's something in our own logic, where we think, and in the American culture, in the Western world, where we think the more we do, the more we're going to produce, and it always has to be going, and it always has to, and you can't ever stop, because if you stop, then you'll limit your production, or goodness sake, you'll be a millionaire instead of a billionaire. But then you realize being a millionaire sounds pretty good. Do I really need to be a billionaire? Or would I rather have everything that God has given me, but also have rest, and also have time with my family? You know, and I know, generations before, there wasn't such thing as spending time with your family. In the generation that came out of World War II, it was work hard, get everything done. And the way we're gonna love our families is to provide for them. And we're grateful for provision. I think what a lot of people would say, the children of that generation would say and have said, I wish I got more time. You don't wish at the end of your life. As a rabbi, I sit with a lot of people at the end of their life. And nobody has ever said on their deathbed, just wish I had more stuff. I just wish I had more money. What people say on their deathbed is, I wish I would have spent more time with the people that I love. And I wish I would have slowed down enough to enjoy things that God actually gave me. Next is there's a provision of rest. And Yeshua speaks to the Sabbath, our Messiah speaks to the Sabbath in Mark chapter 2. And he says, Mark 2, verse 23, now it happened on the Sabbath that Yeshua was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to make their way plucking the heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, look, Why are they doing what is not permitted on the Shabbat? And Yeshua said to them, haven't you ever read what David did when he was in need? And he and those with him became hungry? How he entered into the temple when Abiathar was the priest, was the high priest, and he ate the showbread, which is permitted only for the priest to eat. And he gave some even to those who were with him. And then he said, Shabbat was made for man, not man for Shabbat. And so the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Shabbat. Now, people do some funny things with this, because first you have to go back to their question, the Pharisees' questions. Are they doing what is not permitted on the Sabbath? And the answer is yes and no. The things that they were doing by picking the grain off as they were walking through the fields and eating it, they were breaking the traditions of the elders and the rules of the oral law that dictated that certain things were doing regular work. In fact, when you go to the Talmud, there's 39 categories of work. Not 39 things of work. 39 categories of work. And within those categories, a whole lot of rules. And it's not evil on the part of the rabbis. It's trying to flesh out what Shabbat is. And if it says don't do work, well, what is it? What is work? So let's try to figure out and define what work is. But then they took some of the definitions of what work is and they made them as if God commanded them. So one of the things in the Talmud is don't pick the heads of grain and eat them while you're walking through a field. So they say to Yeshua, are they not breaking the rules for the Sabbath? And Yeshua's like, look, David went into the temple and ate the bread he wasn't supposed to, and I didn't slay him then. So I don't think walking through a field and eating grain on the Sabbath is something that's going to make the Father in heaven upset. Of course, the Pharisees are like, what? He said, look, Shabbat's a gift to us. If you add all of these restrictions to it that I didn't even command you to say as God, that I didn't command you to do as God, then you're making the Sabbath more important than you. But I gave you the Sabbath to rest. And we're walking through a field and we're picking grains and eating because we're enjoying what God has provided his people. So, was Sabbath made for man? Was man made for Shabbat? And then he says, turns out, I'm even Lord over Shabbat. Which, of course, made the Pharisees frustrated. But what Yeshua was saying is it's a provision of rest. Sabbath is a gift. When we add all these restrictions to it and we tell people with it, we get all twisted on what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And we get so focused on what should or shouldn't be that we just let the whole thing go because, man, it's just another day and we should just not lose the day. I said to someone in conversation this week who's a relatively new believer and wanting to grow in his faith. And I said, man, it's simple. Be intentional. Sit down with your family on Saturday morning at 10:30, or really any time of the day on Saturday. Watch our messages. Like, just sit down, watch, listen to sermons, read books, here's a crazy one. Read the Bible. But be intentional about separating the day. Shabbat is the greatest deterrent of idolatry. Because every week, if you pause to remember who God is and the Shabbat that he's given us, and we take the rest that he's given us as a gift, then we won't fall into idolatry because we are completely other and I have this day. Every week, no matter what happens in my life. That's different. It's completely other than all the other days. It's not about honoring Shabbat. It's about Shabbat being a gift, not a burden. It's also why we try to stop people from condemning people for not keeping the Sabbath. It's why we try to stop people at Restoration, to tell people that they're in sin if they don't keep the Sabbath. Stop! It's too much. God designed you for rest. And he built into his system of creation a day for us to set aside as completely other so we could cease and rest and end and pause and refresh and refuel and eat and slow down. Then we can start again towards another Shabbat. And ultimately, to a never-ending Shabbat. When Yeshua comes back, takes us to be with him forever. We won't have to worry about providing for ourselves ever again, because we'll stand in the presence of the Lord. So, as we finish this series, Completely Other, we talk about this day being completely other. Friday, sundown on Friday night, this sundown on Saturday. People list the times of exact sundown and when you're supposed to, stop. You don't have to make it so complicated. Shabbat is a reminder of creation. It's imitation of the Creator. It's liberation from slavery. It's the promise of preservation. And it is a provision of rest. That, man, there isn't anybody in this world right now, middle of a pandemic, that doesn't need that kind of reminder of what rest is. Let me pray for you. Lord God, we thank you for refocusing what Shabbat is for. You didn't create us for the Sabbath. You created the Sabbath for us. Lord, I pray as we are learning and working through becoming completely other for your sake, that you would help us to understand what it means to set the seventh day apart as completely other, so that we can experience the kind of rest you've called us to. And Lord, may we produce and be effective in our production of all the other 6 days. And would you bless it double and triple and continue to bless the efforts that we put in on the other 6. But would you help us to remember that we need rest on the 7th, that the other 6 can be set aside for work. 7th day, completely other, that we be completely other. We worship the one who is complete, Yeshua, our Messiah. We love you, Lord, and we are grateful for this gift of rest. In Yeshua's name. I love you. I'm so excited next week for the release of my book, next 2 weeks for the release of my book, and I'm super excited to preach a series called Jesus Never Said Anything. And I really love this whole series on idolatry. I feel like the Lord helped me separate be completely other. So I pray you have a great week. See you next Shabbat.